Okay, Victoria, hello and very welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
You're really, really welcome. I came across you on Instagram quite recently. I got super excited, number one, because I heard your accent and that you're from Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And then super excited because I could see that you specialize in copywriting for wellness professionals. So I thought you are a perfect guest to have on here. But maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about how did you end up doing the job that you're doing now?
Yeah, so it actually started over a decade ago now. I started out as a journalist. It was what I always wanted to do. And I got my start in women's magazines. I worked up to senior editor level in women's magazines. And as you can imagine, with women's mags, you're writing across a broad spectrum of topics. There's fitness in there, there's pop culture, there's celebrity culture, there's a little bit of everything. But the common thread in everything I wrote about was always wellness. Like, didn't matter the topic, I always somehow managed to bring wellness into it. And I always, with my writing, I wanted to convey this. Like, there was like a theme of empathy the whole way through it. And that was always what I wanted to convey in my writing. So I worked as a journalist for about 10 years in the women's magazines. And round about the start of the pandemic, I changed jobs and I found myself in a job that was absolutely just destroying my mental health. It was a really toxic work environment. And I made the decision to quit. And I had always considered going freelance eventually. I knew I wanted to be a freelance writer, but it was always a someday goal, something I was going to do far off in the future. But all of a sudden I had quit this really toxic job on the Friday and went freelance on the Monday. Like it was literally that quick. So I was really thrown into the deep end, but I was very fortunate. I think I had a lot of beginner's luck and I got a lot of repeat and referral clients straight off the bat. And because of that, I kind of neglected my own copywriting and marketing. I was doing so much for everyone else that I didn't really do any of it for myself. And as you can imagine, eventually my luck ran out. I didn't have the repeat and referral clients anymore because there was a cost of living crisis and people didn't have the budget. And I found myself back in a place where I was, struggling with my mental health a bit because business wasn't going well and I was feeling really burnt out. And I realized I'm going to have to take a step back here and I'm going to have to sit down and figure out my own copywriting and marketing. And that's when I really got into the nitty gritty of what actually works to bring in clients in your business. And I think that experience gave me a much deeper empathy and understanding for my clients as well. Like I have a much deeper knowledge now of that kind of panic that comes over you if you're looking at an empty diary.
Mm.
And I think, for therapists in private practice, it's a very different feeling that if you're coming from employment into this and you suddenly go, oh gosh, this is my livelihood. I need to get people into my practice
Mhm.
or I don't make money. I've bills to pay. It's a very scary thing. And I think that has given me a much deeper understanding of what people actually go through to get their clients and the fear that kind of engulfs you a little when you aren't getting those clients. And because of that, that's led me to develop a couple of different formulas and strategies in my business that help my clients actually get those clients now. So that goes across their website copywriting and across their blogs and their emails as well. Yeah, so I'm very fortunate now that I have a full client list of health and wellness professionals. And yeah, it's been a really great journey. I couldn't have predicted 10 years ago that this is where I would be and I would go from like women's magazine journalism into this career as a copywriter. But yeah, I'm really glad I'm here.
Brilliant. And I really appreciate you sharing just how difficult perhaps that journey actually was at times because although you're doing something that's very different maybe from therapists in private practice, I think a lot of private practice practitioners don't realize just how challenging the role of self-employment can be, and the highs and lows of it and the work that might be involved in it. And so it's really great, well, it wasn't great for you to go through that, but really appreciate you sharing that just how difficult it can be. And sometimes we do need to take a step back like you did, take a step back and look, what am I doing here? And sort of reassessing to be able to move forward. And that's for me, if I think about my journey, self-employment has been exactly like that, that we need to step back sometimes in order to move forward.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
for some of the people that maybe are listening in and they're hearing you talking about copywriting and think, well, that doesn't apply to me, or that's not something that I need. Could you maybe just explain, what do we mean by copywriting? Like, what is it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, people will say I'm biased when I say this, but copywriting is the absolute foundation of your business. Basically, copywriting is words that persuade and sell, and you need to have your copywriting to be able to speak to the people you want to call into your business. So, copywriting, most people when they hear copywriting, they think of the words that are on their website. That is copywriting, but it also extends into every bit of communication you put out in your business. So copywriting is also in your email marketing, it's in your blogs, it's in the content that you post on social media. And it's basically you conveying who your ideal client is, speaking to the problems they have, and showing them the solution you provide and how you are of value. And that's your snapshot.
Yeah. And when you're describing that, it's also making me think about that across all of those channels, really, it's also what your authentic way is of trying to convey and trying to communicate that, because everybody will have different personalities and different styles and different ways of doing things.
Yeah, that's exactly it as well. And I think people can be really afraid to bring their personality into it. Like it doesn't have to be really dry. It can be something that's really personal and really natural. And I think a lot of people kind of get their guard up when they think of copywriting because the intention is to sell with it. People think that it has to sound salesy and it's going to be really sleazy, but it doesn't have to be that way at all. And actually, it shouldn't be that way at all because I think people are too smart now. People know when something is really salesy. Like, to give you an example, like more of a real life example than an online example, my husband and I have just bought a house. So we've been spending a lot of time in like furniture showrooms at the moment. And I can't with people selling to me in furniture showrooms because they pull out all of the standard like selling tactics. And I know they're doing it and it makes me very uncomfortable. And I think that's where there's a block for so many people. They think it has to be this, oh, buy now, like really kind of aggressive selling, but it doesn't and it shouldn't be, particularly when it relates to therapy, because, you're talking to people who are potentially vulnerable and people who need to feel a certain level of trust before they even inquire to work with you. And those kind of salesy, over the top salesy tactics just aren't going to work in that setting.
And it wouldn't be like that, wouldn't be like a therapist wouldn't have that in it, in them
Yeah.
as wouldn't have, they wouldn't go down that route of trying to be pushy in that work. But I think it's then either they perceive marketing and copywriting to be like that, so they just then shut off to it,
Yeah.
thinking about that authenticity and that actually, like therapists and counselors, have absolutely innate, excellent marketing skills because they know their ideal client really well and they really empathize with their ideal client. So they've got all the skills there. They just don't say that that's what it is.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And like, you're going to be coming from a place of empathy because that's who you are as a therapist. But I think it's just people get it into their heads that it's salesy and then therefore it must be unethical. But it doesn't have to be written in that way at all. It's just about identifying. what it is your ideal client is actually going through, and then presenting them with the information they need to be able to make a decision. You're never forcing anyone into a decision. You're just giving them all the information they need in the most persuasive way possible so that they can actually reach a decision.
Can you maybe think of some examples, maybe from therapists' sites that you've maybe reviewed or done some work on? Like, where typically might we have a tendency to go wrong when it comes to writing copy on our websites, for example?
Yeah, so I think the most common thing I see on therapist pages would be particularly in the about me section. A mistake people tend to make there is they talk about themselves. And I know that sounds really silly because it's an about me page, so you think I'm going to talk about myself, but an about me page isn't actually really about you at all. It's actually about your ideal client. So people go onto that page and they'll say, I studied here, I have this qualification, I specialize in this, blah, blah, blah. And yes, all of those things are really important and people do need to know those things and they build your authority. But you need to be explaining how all of those things actually relate to the people who are going to sign up to your services. If you're just, writing out all those things like it's a menu. People can't relate to that. So it's like, oh, I went to such and such a college and I got my degree in psychotherapy. Okay, tell me what that means. Like, I'm someone who wants to see a therapist because I'm really struggling with my confidence. Okay, what does it mean to me that you have all these qualifications? And I think that's where I see most people going wrong. And if anyone needs a hand to remember how to go about it instead, think it's not about me. People
Mhm.
are coming to your page and they're thinking, what's in it for me? So you can imagine your ideal client, they're coming onto their website and they're reading your About Me page. And as they're reading it, they're going, yeah, but what's in it for me? So if you can go through, if you already have an About Me page, if you can go through it line by line and just imagine you're that client and they're going, what's in it for me? And just try and find what is the actual benefit of each of these things I've listed. What is the actual benefit for the people who are coming to me and want to solve the problem?
Okay. And I'm wondering how would you then kind of change that? Like what's on that about me section? How could that then be changed in order to give that kind of sense? So when you're talking about I'm struggling with confidence, how do I then change that dialogue, that text, that's content that's written on the about me page to evoke that sense of
Yeah, I think so. Not so much in the About Me page, but like if you had a sales page, for example, one of the most common things to do in copywriting would be to identify your ideal client's pain points on that page. So you could do something along the lines of, does this sound like you? And you could have a bullet pointed list, and it could be something like, you am up every time you have to give a presentation at work, or you go on a first date and you're tripping over your words or whatever. And it's listing out those pain points
Mhm.
that you know that your ideal client has. And then once you've done that, once you've introduced those pain points, then you're introducing your solution and you're saying, this is how what I do helps. And then you can pull in those things about, I've studied here, I specialize in this, I have a degree in whatever. And you can pull all that information in there. And this just means you've you've drawn the person into your page and they're more able to see how the qualifications you have actually relate to them.
So that would be what you're kind of describing there, talking to the pain points would be maybe like for a therapist, their sort of main like services page or
Yeah.
work with me sort of page, that content is speaking to the pain points, the difficulties that they're having in their language. And I think that's it. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit because again, what we might do as therapists is we get caught up in jargon,
Yeah.
lots of big kind of therapeutic words and not thinking about the client. Can you maybe talk a little bit into that?
Yeah, definitely. And like this is something I see like not just the therapist. I think pretty much everyone does it because when you're writing your copy or your content, you're always coming to it as the expert. But it's easy to forget that your ideal client isn't the expert, they're the novice, and they're like, you're up here and they're down here. And people forget that. You can keep the more jargony things you can keep for your blog content, because this is where you can explain it in a lot more detail. But with your copy, you want to really be using your client language. And I think as a therapist, you you have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? You get a lot of insight because you work so closely with people. You know, you're going to have reams and reams and reams of notes, and you're listening to people every day, and you're going to get familiar with the language they're using. So without breaching anyone's confidentiality, obviously, go back and think about what are the words and phrases that are coming up time and time again. You know, what are the words my clients are using to actually describe their problems? And as much as possible, you want to be filtering those into your copy. And it just gives people that you're inside my head feeling. And you always want that when people read through it, they want to go, well, like this person really understands me. And that's the result of using the language that they use themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what you're kind of saying there makes me think about some of the therapist websites that I've seen and just sort of reviewed that they will be launching into, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, or I'm EMDR, all of these different modalities, and they will give it great amounts of detail explaining their modalities. And I will often say, like, for most clients, unless they're specifically searching for a modality for a specific issue, most clients don't actually either care or really even need to know what your modality is, because that's not what they're there for. They're there to say if you have an understanding in the difficulty that they're having and that you can help them. The process of how they get there to the transformation doesn't bother them so much. It's just wanting to get a sense of, you can help me to get to that
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah. And they often won't understand, you know, all the different terms and the different specialisms and titles. They just want to know, can you help me with what I'm dealing with?
And maybe, like you said, that the blogs, that might be a place where you could be writing a blog about what is CBT for whatever their particular specialism is, that you could maybe address those things in the blog pages or something, but don't clog up your website with
No.
too much of that kind of jargon on it. Would you tend to lean into like almost less is more when it comes to website, like trying to keep it simple if you can?
Yes, I think definitely with your copy, as we said, like your blog is where you can go into a lot more detail. With service pages, I wouldn't focus so much on length as I would making sure that you're answering every question that your ideal client has, you know, thinking of the potential objections they might have when they come to your website. You know, what are they interested in knowing? Is price an objection for them? Those sort of things. You're going through each section of that page and you're answering the questions that you think they'll have.
Okay, super. And just going back to the About Me page, if I think about my About Me page on my website, because I have lived in experience of my specialism, that I did share some of my story around that. And I'm wondering, like, is that, I know that some therapists will have boundaries around self-disclosure, maybe not feel completely comfortable around self-disclosure, but I'm wondering whether that could be something that's helpful for the About Me section, that if you've lived an experience of your specialism, how that might evoke something in a potential client.
Yeah, absolutely. Like storytelling is such a powerful tool. And I do think people are going to have different levels of comfort with it. But the reason storytelling is so effective is because it allows your ideal clients and the people who are coming to your website to see what the actual transformation is, because you're showing them, I was at my point A, I did X, Y, and Z, and now I'm at my point B. So it shows them that a transformation is possible, but it also highlights your authority because you were the person who achieved that. And I think it's really just about getting, finding where your comfort level is with that. You don't have to be completely 100% vulnerable if it's going to make you uncomfortable, and definitely don't do it if it's going to make you uncomfortable. But if you can find, a nugget or just something from your own personal story that's going to really relate to those people that are coming to your website, I mean, definitely try and tease it out because it is really, really effective, and it makes people feel really seen. It validates their experiences, and when people feel validated, they see you more so as the expert and the authority and the person that they actually want to work with.
100%. I actually got a little message that came through. I think it was the end of last week, and it was someone who had booked a discovery call. They've since converted into a client, but the email that I got about looking forward to our initial consultation call was that they'd basically been on my website, and every bit that they were reading, they connected with. Like, it was
Yeah.
that they're almost looking at my website and saying, "Is this you? Do you struggle with this?" That every single point they're going, "Yeah,"
Yeah.
and they're nodding along. I really appreciate that when I get little messages like that come through where people say, "It's like you were inside my head."
Yeah.
You
And
know?
that is the goal with copy. And like I think that's really important to you in terms of, the fear of feeling salesy, because I think if you can get into your head that it's not so much about selling as it is about giving someone a solution that they're actually looking for. Cause like imagine the relief that person feels when they come to your page and they're like, oh, finally somebody gets it. Like that's such a lovely feeling. And I think, if you are worried about coming across as salesy, if you can just keep that in the back of your mind, you're coming from a really lovely place. And there's someone out there who is going through something really, really, really tough, and they've tried so much to try and solve it and they haven't found anything. And now they've stumbled on your page and you're saying everything that's been going on in their own head. And finally they're thinking, yes, solution, finally, like just keep that in your head when you're writing your copy, and I really don't think you can go too far wrong.
And it's not really different from any other investments that we make, really, is it? Like, I have a problem, I need to find a solution to that problem, and I'll go on Google and I'll search for it, whatever that problem may be.
Yeah,
I'll find the website, the business, the person that's able to meet my needs.
yeah, exactly. I think just a lot of people get a bit of a block with it when therapy and you're dealing with people's feelings and emotions, and there's mental health and so many ethical boundaries in there as well. But yeah, just always remember you're coming from that place of empathy, and you're trying to solve a genuine problem. You're not trying to force anyone to sign up for something or do something that they don't want to do. You're just trying to guide people into making a decision that's right for them.
Yeah. And also the fact that we have to give our potential clients that autonomy, that they've got complete choice over whether to engage. You're not taking them by the arm and
No.
forcing them to come and work with you. They can come to your website and make a choice as to whether you feel like that, whether that you're the right therapist for them, just as they can go and search on 5 or 6 other websites and make a decision on it. That there's no pushiness and there's no forcing, because you're not
Yeah.
making them line up and work with you, that there is, there's choice there. When you talk about storytelling, am I right in thinking that, so if I'm a therapist approaching writing content for my website, that I want to be like really clear on who my ideal client is, and I really want to almost imagine I'm inside their head and thinking about what they're struggling with, the difficulties they're having, the language that they would use. When you talk about storytelling, is that literally that journey, the journey that they would be almost like coming on with me, kind of working through the
Yeah.
difficult, what you sort of mean by it?
Yeah. So you can use a case study of someone you've worked with before, and there's going to be certain boundaries around this. And it's different with therapy when there are those boundaries. So there's several ways around it. You obviously you want to keep people anonymous, so you can just have an initial, or you can keep it more vague where you're not necessarily saying it's about a specific client. But what you want to do with that is you're taking their point A and you're describing that in really vivid detail. So I met Elle and she was struggling with such and such. And you're going to go into a lot of specific emotional detail about where that person was at their point A. And you're always thinking, when you're doing this, you're always thinking of the person reading it and you're thinking about how they will identify with it. So if you're going to tell a story, make sure it's a story that your ideal client is actually going to be able to relate to and will be able to see themselves in. So you want to describe all of that in really specific detail so people have that you're inside my head. This is exactly what I'm experiencing reaction again. And then in the middle section of that, you want to bring in your process. So what exactly you would do in this scenario or what you did do in this scenario. So you can give a little bit of information about, your therapeutic process and what that looks like. And then you finally, at the end of it, you want to bring in the point B. So what was the transformation and what was the outcome for this client? How are they feeling now? So you have them at the beginning where they're really struggling, and then you have them at the end, their point B, where they've solved this particular problem. And again, you want to go into that specific detail about where they're at now, how they're feeling so much better. And then at the very, very end of that, you can include a call to action. So a call to action is basically just a sentence and you're asking someone to take a specific action. So you could say something along the lines of, you know, do you see your experiences reflected in this story? And are you ready to, I don't know, work on your confidence or whatever it is? If that sounds good to you, you can reply to this email or, tap the get in touch button and we can talk through the options or whatever. And that's basically your storytelling format.
Okay. And that storytelling, would that be something that you could do across any of your platforms, like your website or social media, that it could be for anywhere?
Yeah, definitely. I find it works best in email. It's one of my favorite emails to send or the storytelling email. But also on social media, like what I would commonly do is I use a lot of my storytelling in carousels. So you have your point A right at the beginning, you're just leading people through the story and it's really, really engaging. But yeah, definitely email. Email is a great platform because it's more like having a one-on-one conversation with someone, and you just have the extra word count compared to what you do on social media. So it's a really lovely place to kind of tease out those longer stories.
I definitely agree with you about the email, and ironically, I'm always harping on Instagram about the importance of having email because I think we can get so consumed, and I've been guilty of this as well. We get so consumed in the content creation of social media, of making a reel and, all of this sort of stuff that we can spend so much time and so much energy on that and either not have an email list at all, or not spending any time actually writing to the people who are on our email list and actually the engagement, and you'll probably know this better than me, the engagement on social media is actually much, much less than in email, isn't that right?
Much less. I think the average reach for social media content is about 5%. So
Mhm.
about 5% of your audience will see your content on social media, which absolutely sucks because you probably spend hours creating it and then it's seen by so few people. But then in comparison, if you have if you're sending high quality emails and you keep your email list clean, you can potentially have your emails delivered to 100% of your audience. So if you had 500 people on your list, that's 500 people you're going to see your emails. And if your open rates are good, you could have 50%, maybe even 60% people opening those emails. So like it's definitely a medium to pay attention to and to think about a lot more. And I just find it's a lot less pressurized as well. Instagram, it's very easy to get sucked into the metrics and to kind of lose your voice a bit on social media because it's just so hard to get seen and so hard to get heard. But with email, you're allowed to establish a connection with people more. It feels like sitting down with a friend and having a cup of tea. Whereas if you are on social media, it feels like you've walked into a room and you have to like shout at everyone.
A really lovely way of explaining it, actually. That is how it feels. I go through a bit of love-hate with social media that sometimes I'm
Yeah,
feeling that and I'm enjoying it and I like the creativity of it, and then sometimes I'm just like, "I just" so it's nice to be able to kind of to take it that back seat and maybe to not feel that it's the only place that you
yeah.
getting or putting your energy to, especially like you said, that you could be spending an hour, 2 hours, trying to create this perfect reel and then only 5% of your audience actually see it like that. That's really soul destroying sometimes.
It is a bit, yeah. But like definitely but like don't neglect social media, but I would advise people to start thinking of it more so as a way to funnel people into your list. So even if you have 1 week every quarter where instead of using social media to, get bookings or get more clients, just have 1 week where you use it to funnel people into your list and you'll soon start to see like more subscribers on that list and you'll be able to, build more of a connection on there instead of, pumping out so much content on social media.
A lot of therapists, to be honest, don't have an email list, and that's something I'm really aware of and wanting to work on in the coming months. And I'm wondering for therapists that are listening that maybe they do have an email list, but haven't got a clue what to actually send in the email. Would you have like a few suggestions of how they can maybe get started with their email list communications?
Yeah, so I have a 4 email a month strategy that I advise people to follow. A lot of people just, send whatever pops into their head. And it's great when you've loads of ideas, but eventually you'll run out of ideas and then the list gets neglected. So I always find people to follow a four four email a month strategy. And the 4 email a month strategy basically uses buyer journey content. So it leads people along that buyer journey. The first of the 4 emails is problem awareness. So problem awareness is giving your clients that perspective shift. So whenever someone encounters a problem, they they don't necessarily know what the problem is. They know they're experiencing pain, but they don't actually know what is at the root of that pain, and they often misdiagnose. But as a therapist, you will have a clearer idea of what's actually going on. So in that first email, you're basically saying, you're going through XYZ and you think the problem is this, but as the expert, as the therapist, I know what's actually going on is this. So immediately you've made them more aware of what the problem actually is. Yeah. And then in the second email, this is known as an agitation email. So the agitation email is about people when they have a problem, they'll try loads and loads of things to try and solve the problem, but a lot of these things are ineffective. So a really good example in a therapy perspective would be someone's going through a really challenging time. So they go into Eason's and they buy every self-help book they can find. And they keep buying all these self-help books and nothing changes. They still have the problem, they still feel the same, and they don't know what to do about it. So as a therapist, your job in this email is pointing out there's a reason why all these things aren't working. And here's what you actually need. Here's where you're going wrong. Here's what you actually need. So that's your second email. And the third email then is the storytelling email. It's a solution awareness email. And it's what we've just talked about, where you're bringing in that storytelling element and you're showing, either your story or a client's case study, and you're walking your reader through that point A to the point B. And then your final email is your authority email. And the authority email is where you're either giving, an opinion on something related to therapy, or again, you're bringing in some of your own personal storytelling. And what you're doing with all four of these emails is that you're basically leading your ideal clients through that buyer journey. You're taking them from problem aware to solution aware to actually seeing you as the person that they want to work
I
with.
love
So,
it.
yeah.
Sure. While you were describing that, I was thinking about my ideal client, and when you're like problem aware, binge eating is my niche, then believing that it's a greed issue or a willpower issue, and obviously me being able to highlight that it's not that, and then the agitation that they've tried every single plan, diet, self-help book. So I was seeing my own ideal client there as you were going
Yeah.
stages. So hopefully people listening, can do the same and actually think, oh gosh, that would be a really interesting, that would be a really good kind of email sequence to have. Um just before we wrap up, I think there's something there that is why I am really passionate about emails and really important to touch on as well, is when you're describing about taking people through a journey that what we're used to, I think, as therapists, is that we're used to people being in pain right now and wanting to work with you right now. So they'll find you on a therapist directory or they'll find your website and they will book a call straight away because I know I need help right now. But what that then overlooks is how many people aren't at that stage yet. They're in maybe that contemplation stage, or they have a lot of anxieties around it, or they're not 100% sure if you're the right therapist for them, that actually is where email is just gold, really, isn't it? That you've got time then.
Yes, absolutely. It gives you that time to establish a connection, and it's not as pressurized as social media because people are actually going to see your emails and they're going to read through them, and it's just fantastic for building that trust, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining me today. That was really insightful, really helpful. And I'm hoping that people listening will now be thinking, right, well, not just rewriting maybe their website, but also
Yeah.
think, if I need to
Yeah.
that well. So you have just recently released some really helpful resources and courses about emails. Do you want to just let people know what you have available and where they can find you?
Yeah, so I have just released Emails to Earnings, which is the only email marketing course for health and wellness professionals. And it basically shows people exactly how to write those four emails that I just ran through and how to use that to get more bookings in your business. And there's loads in there about how to actually grow your list and get subscribers into your list as well. Yeah. As well as that, I also offer done for you copywriting. So this is for the people who don't want to learn it. They just want someone to come in and to do it all for them, basically. So I offer that across website copywriting, blogs, and emails. Yeah. And the best place to find me at the moment is on Instagram, and I am at written by Victoria Stokes.
That's super. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much.